Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak and Rivkah speaking to you from south of Jerusalem, here in the very holy land of Israel. Today is the second day of the month of Kislev, 5784. It's November 14th, 2023. This coming Shabbat, we are reading Parshat Toldot from the book of Genesis, beginning chapter 25, verse 19, concluding chapter 28, verse 9. And of course, we are more than a month into the war in Gaza and in our northern border with Lebanon here in Israel. So we're going to be talking about all those things. And of course, once again, the Parsha, the weekly reading of the Torah, Parshat Toldot, touches on our current circumstances and sheds light on what's happening today, and also sheds light on the pasuk, the verse from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes. There is nothing new under the sun, because there has been strife in the area of Gaza for a long, long time, way before anybody invented the name Palestine or came up with an idea that there was a people that were Palestinians. Way before then. It's always been a hot spot for Israel through our thousands of years of history. Before we get more involved in the Torah reading, just a few other items, and before we get more involved into an update on what's happening here, I would say on the war front, but the war front is also the home front. It's really one and the same in many ways. I'll talk about that in a minute. But yesterday, which was the final day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, it was yesterday because I'm recording this in the evening, recording this Tuesday evening, so it's already now the second day, beginning of the second day of Kislev, but yesterday day was actually the final day of Mar Cheshvan, the 29th day, and the 29th day of Mar Cheshvan is the holiday of Sigd. I would spell that in English, S-I-G-D, Sigd. And it's an Ethiopian Jewry, a Jewish Ethiopian holiday, which was observed for many, many centuries in Ethiopian by the Ethiopian Jewish community there. I say observed because it would begin as a fast. The day starts out as a fast and concludes with a feast. So I didn't use the word celebrate because it was a very solemn day for much of the day in Ethiopia. It has a different feeling to it today here in Israel. But just a quick on one foot talk about the history of the Ethiopian Jews. I'd hoped to talk about this last week in advance of the Sigd, but of course didn't have enough time in the show, so I didn't talk about it. So let's give it some attention now. The Ethiopian diaspora, the exile, was the oldest of all Jewish diasporas, all Jewish exiles, all Jewish communities in the world. It actually began before the destruction of the first temple. And there are different explanations as to why it started. And one is sort of an Aggadic, a midrashic traditional story, and there's other historical evidence that might doesn't contradict the midrashic, but in short, we don't have any definite answers. It was 2,500 years ago at least. I guess it was a little bit longer than that, maybe 2,700 years. And one of the midrashic understandings is that the Ethiopians originated from the tribe of Dan. And if you recall, Dan, interesting, another reflection of what's happening today. Dan, originally, the inheritance, the land inheritance that they were assigned or won by a raffle, as it were, by Joshua, was in the area next to Judah, but basically west of Judah, the area of today Gaza, and it's in beyond Gaza. But in those days, the Pelishtim, the Philistines, were very, very powerful in Gaza, and ultimately Dan wasn't able to conquer them and to inherit that land. So they traveled north, and were given a parcel of land in the very northern area of Israel. And again, the same northern area that today is embattled in our war with Hezbollah. But then after the death of Solomon and the splitting of the kingdom into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And at one point, the northern kingdom wanted to wage war against the southern kingdom, and Dan, despite the fact that they were not able to conquer the lands of the Philistines in the area of Gaza, they were considered to be top warriors. And so the people of the north turned to them and said, "We want you to lead this war against Judea." And their response was, "We do not fight our brothers. We're all brothers, and we will not fight." And they left. They uprooted themselves and went south to Egypt, southwest to Egypt. I guess you could call that draft dodging. I don't know, but they refused to be drafted into a war in which they would be fighting their brothers. They had learned a lesson that we're going to learn in a few weeks in the book of Genesis, that brothers must not fight brothers. So they wound up in Egypt, and there's historical evidence of Jews in Egypt from First Temple times. And there's also historical evidence of a Jewish stronghold in the island of Elephantine, which is in the southern part of Egypt on the Nile River. And they actually, in First Temple times, now I don't know that what I'm about to tell you has anything to do with the Ethiopian Jews, but I'm just adding it in as part of what we do know about Jews in Egypt in First Temple times. And in Second Temple times, there's a very large community of Jews in Alexandria. They might have even been the majority of that vast city at the time. They certainly were a very large percentage of the population. But back to Elephantine, they actually built a temple there and made offerings. And that seems kind of an odd thing. I mean, we know that there's only one temple, and it's in Jerusalem, but this is a historical fact. And they were actually in contact with the authorities in Jerusalem. We have evidence, archaeological evidence on papyrus of letters written back and forth asking about certain laws concerning Passover of all things. And at one point, their fate took a downhill turn, and they were forced out of Elephantine, and from there they might have gone south, which would have been into Ethiopia. That's why I mentioned this. Again, we don't know for sure. It was so long ago. There's not any direct evidence, but there is evidence. However, we know that Jews have been. The prophet Isaiah mentions the Jews in Ethiopia. And there's a long tradition within Jewish literature of the Jews of Ethiopia. At one point, they were very strong. They had sovereignty in the northern part of Ethiopia and were independent. And This was at a time when the Jews in the other diaspora were being ejected, forced out of Spain in 1492, convert or die, or convert and then die eventually, because that's what happened as well. And the Jews were going through severe trials and tribulations, and this independent, powerful kingdom of Jews in Ethiopia was something that was the buzz. There was a buzz about it, and people knew about it and talked about it and wrote about it, and it gave people tremendous hope. But again, the fortunes of the Jews in Ethiopia declined over the centuries, and by the end of the 19th century, with famine and with forced conversion, because at this point there was not only the Ethiopian church, but the Ethiopian church allowed missionaries from the West into Ethiopia and said, you can convert the Jews, you can't convert Ethiopian Christians, Ethiopians who belonged to the Church of Ethiopia, which was one of the oldest churches of Christendom. So the Jews became fair game for the missionaries, and some did convert. And in the time of the famine, they were promised that if they convert, they will get some land and some sustenance, be able to live. But others, of course, did not convert. And long story short, by the late 20th century, there were more wars in Ethiopia, and they were in very dire conditions, and a couple of major Israeli initiatives, which involved the Mossad, the army, and mostly involved the efforts, the faith and belief and dream of the Ethiopians to do whatever it would take to return to the land of Israel. And so, yes, now we have a population here in Israel of, I imagine, about 170,000 Ethiopian Jews. That means Jews who were either born or their parents or grandparents were born in Ethiopia. They're a very vibrant part of the population, a very inspirational part of the population. And they celebrate this, getting back to the beginning of my story, they celebrate Sigd, which takes place in the 50th day following Yom Kippur. And different explanations also as to its origin. One explanation is that it reflects the re-embracing and recommitment to the Torah that we read about in the book of Ezra. And it is also an expression of longing to return. So it began as a day of fasting, and the people in their villages would pack up their things, bring the livestock that they planned to slaughter and eat at the end of the day, and would be led by the Kesim, who were the spiritual leaders of the communities, and they would ascend to a mountaintop near their village and gather there and pray about returning to the land of Israel, pray about returning to Jerusalem, about the Mikdash, the Holy Temple. This was their stated goal, just like every other Jew in every other diaspora community, to return to the land, to return to Jerusalem, to return and they, for much of their existence, did not know that the Holy Temple had been destroyed, because they left before it was destroyed. They had very little communication, if any, with outside Jewish communities. There were some important, very significant communication, but they brought with them the traditions, the Torah-based traditions of the time that they left Israel, which is First Temple times. And of course, we know that our traditions developed and changed radically, drastically over the centuries, especially after the destruction of the Second Temple, when we no longer had a religion that was a way of life that was based on the Holy Temple. So their traditions are very different. And in fact, when we see their traditions, we can see it reflected in what we read in the Torah and what we understand of the ancient Israelite traditions. So it's very fascinating. And in any case, Sigd is now a very happy, joy-filled holiday that's celebrated all through Israel. There's usually a very major gathering in Jerusalem and Armon Netziv, and the promenade that overlooks the Temple Mount. It's led by Kesim, again, spiritual leaders, and a lot of people gather there, and not only Ethiopian Jews, of course, but Jews of all types here in Israel. And it's this year the gathering didn't take place because of the security situation, so people celebrate it in smaller gatherings in their local communities. Anyway, that was yesterday, the final day of the month of Mar Cheshvan, and if you've been hearing me for these years, many years, I see it as a sign of the imminent rebuilding of the Holy Temple, because we always say, why do we call it Mar Cheshvan, Bitter Cheshvan? Because there's no holidays. But here's a holiday, a real holiday, that most of the world's Jews knew nothing about until recent times. And now it is not only celebrated here in Israel every year, but it was officially recognized by the Israeli Knesset I think about 15 years ago. And it is, it's always good to have another day that's a holiday, another day to celebrate. And even in times when we may not be in the mood for celebrating, as in now, as we're at war, but still it gives us strength and encouragement. And God willing, next year we will all be gathered outdoors in Jerusalem, celebrating together the holiday of Sigd. Sigd, by the way, is a word that means to prostrate oneself, to bow down. It's an ancient word in Ge'ez, which is an ancient Semitic language related to Hebrew. And the word Sigd also is related to a similar word in Aramaic, and as well as in Arabic, because what we in English refer to as a mosque, in Hebrew we refer to as a mizgad, which is a place of worship, a place of prostration. And there's an Arabic word which I don't know I'm going to pronounce it right, so I'm not going to say it, but it's basically mizgad, with a soft G, I believe. I'll leave it at that. But anyway, that's Sigd. That was yesterday, this afternoon. Yesterday evening, this afternoon was Rosh Chodesh Kislev. The month of Kislev. It is the 9th month of the Hebrew year, which begins in the month of Nisan, the month of the Exodus from Egypt, the month of Passover. It's the month, of course, of Hanukkah, which begins on the 25th of Kislev. So it is a month that speaks to us of heroism, of battling our oppressors, battling our enemies, and being victorious in battle, and of rededicating the Holy Temple. So in this time of war, it bodes well. These are all good things for us to be focused on and to be thinking about. And as we progress in our war against Hamas, if you've been following, Israel just is deeper and deeper into Gaza. Israel has full control of the northern part of Gaza. We have control over Gaza City, which is where the Hamas terrorists are located underground, although some probably have already fled further south through their tunnels. where they live like rodents. And the big focus now is on the Shifa hospital, under which is Hamas headquarters, and Israel's already been penetrating tunnels and they've been exposing and showing the world what exactly has been going on there. At the same time, Israel has been calling upon the hospital to evacuate, and Israel's been helping them evacuate. What does that mean? Israel is protecting the doctors, the nurses, and the patients from Hamas gunmen who shoot at them when they leave, because Hamas wants them to stay in there in order to make it more difficult for Israel to enter and hunt down the Hamas terrorists. So Israel is providing incubators for the babies in the maternity ward. Israel has wanted to provide fuel for the hospital because they don't have fuel, because Hamas steals their fuel. And Hamas prevented the hospital staff from receiving the fuel. Today, I know that there is a big demonstration, tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, I don't know, in Washington, D.C., supporters of Israel. The West, parts of the West, I know not all of the West, but parts of the West have lost their minds. They've lost their sense of right and wrong. They've lost their Tselem Elokim, their understanding of, appreciation of, and adhering to the image of God in which they were created, and they are, supporting and celebrating the barbaric cruelty of Hamas, which came in full focus on the 7th of October, and there's still things being uncovered and footage from security cameras, from all sorts of things that are becoming available every day, just showing the horrors, the sick things that were done, and their despicable treatment of the Gazans, who I have no sympathy for Gazans. I have to tell you, I have no sympathy. They were celebrating, they were ecstatic on the 7th of October. Now they're not so ecstatic. But they also have been and continue to be abused, just used as pawns by Hamas. Hamas wants them to get killed so that they can use it as against Israel, to the gullible and stupid West. Gullible because they believe these things, but not just stupid, also evil, because most of those who would believe these things, these lies that Hamas puts out all the time, want to believe it because they basically want to take the side of Hamas against Israel, because they have come up with this notion that Israel is bad. And that's part of the huge intellectual, ideological dump that United States and much of Western Europe finds itself in today, this wokeism, this diversity garbage, which basically is just another name for, Marxist, revolutionary, anti-West, anti-family, anti-Judeo-Christian values, anti-right and wrong. And it's like a cult. It's a cult that's filled a vacuum. It's filled a vacuum in America, because as America has become more and more secular, that what once filled people with notions of right and wrong, of good and evil, of purpose in life, has ebbed away, and it's being filled by this cult of hate, of destruction, and of death. And wake up, America. I know there's a lot of good people in America that support Israel. I know that. I know there are people who are people of faith, and they haven't been swept up by this. But you have to fight back, because America is I fear more for America than for Israel. Israel, we're going to stand strong. Um, if I had to someone say what are our greatest strengths in Israel, I would say family, because that's what this is all about. It's all about family. Everybody here is family. Yes, sometimes, many times, we're a dysfunctional family. We're fighting. But in this case, it's all personal. Those people, those hostages, 240 hostages, 239, one was killed in captivity. They are family for all of us. And that's how we feel, and that's how our soldiers feel. Our soldiers are our children, our parents, our brothers, our sisters, and they are lions. And they are putting their lives on the line for our people, for our family. So that's strength number one. Strength number two is our Torah, is our tradition, our set of beliefs, our history. This country is filled with prayer, is filled with song, is filled with tradition, with soldiers. They're the biggest item being requested by soldiers are tzitzit. You know what tzitzit are? They're the fringes that Jews wear on the corners of their garments. Now, religious Jews, observant Jews, wear tzitziot. Those soldiers who were called up and ran to the front lines that were religious, by and large, brought their tzitziot. They brought their tzitzit. But who's asking for them? Jews that weren't observant, Jews that would have considered themselves secular. And they want that extra protection. They want it. And they're getting it. Everybody's pulling together here. Religious, not religious, ultra-Orthodox, ultra-secular, all the different ethnicities in Israel among the Jews, the Bedouin population, the Druze, and many of the Arab population, the Muslim Arab population, and certainly the Christian Arab population, we're all in this together. And it's family. And it's tradition, the Torah. It's the strength of the land of Israel, which just, it's here for us. And thirdly, it's that wonderful bit of advice that we received in the book of Deuteronomy by Moshe on behalf of Hashem, on behalf of God. And that was, I present before you good and bad, life and death. And a few verses later it says, choose life. Choose life. That is the greatest insider tip that we've ever received. Choose life, because life gives us strength. Life gives us a tomorrow. Life gives us continuity. I think I talked about this last week, but some of the most encouraging things are people getting married, soldiers getting married, people having babies. Babies are being born. Babies are being born to communities along the Gazan border that were devastated. New babies are being born to these communities. Death and destruction came in a day, but the day after, there's already rebirth and growth and life again. So yes, life. And you know what? The jihadists, the Hamas jihadists, they boast. They think that Israel's, that our dedication to life is our weakness, because we will endanger ourselves for the preservation of life. And they think that their greatest strength is that they love death. And they do love death. That's the whole cult. It's a cult of death. And there are Muslims who were indoctrinated into this cult who have left it and can testify to how it's taught. They actually place young people who are there teaching to be shahid, to be martyrs, right? To die while killing Jews. They place them in graves, and they stay there, and they are supposed to make it their home. They worship death. and they think that's a strength, well, it's a dead end. So this is why I'm not worried about Israel, but I am very concerned about the United States, and I know you have the strength to pull through this, but focus, people, focus and work together. Okay, just like we work together here, we don't have to always agree on everything, and we have different lifestyles and sometimes different belief systems, but if the difference between right and wrong is important to you, if you can still determine what's good and what's evil, and if the word God or the concept of God or the reality of God still speaks to you, you're on the front line right now in the United States. You have to win your country back, because there have been tremendous inroads, tunnels, just like in Gaza, but these tunnels have been into your institutions of higher learning, into government bureaucracies and government itself, into high schools and into elementary schools, into entertainment. They have burrowed tunnels into America, and you have to get these ideas and these people out and return to the ideals and the strengths that made America a great country. So that's my prayer for the United States of America. Let's talk a bit about Parshat Toldot. We'll begin in Hebrew and then in English, the first few verses from Genesis chapter 25, verse 19. Ve'eda toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham holid et Yitzchak. Vayehi Yitzchak ben 40 shana. Bekachto et Rivkah bat Betuel ha'arami mipadan Aram. Achot Lavan ha'arami lo leisha. Ve'yeta Yitzchak l'Hashem lenochach ishto ki akrahi. ויתר לו השם ותהר רבקה אשתו, ויתרוצצו הבנים בקרבה, ותאמר אם כן למה זה אנוכי, ותלך לדרוש את השם. ויאמר השם לה, שני גויים בבטנך, ושני לאומים ממאך, ויפרדו הלאום מלאום יאמץ ורב יעבוד צעיר. And these are the offspring of Yitzchak, son of Avraham. Avraham begot Yitzchak. Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivkah, a daughter of Betuel, the Aramean, from Padan Aram, sister of Lavan, the Aramean, as a wife for himself. Yitzchak entreated Hashem opposite his wife because she was barren. Hashem allowed himself to be entreated by him, and his wife Rivkah conceived. The children agitated within her, and she said, if so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of Hashem. Note, Rivkah is herself praying to Hashem. She was a woman of initiative. Well, we saw that when Eliezer when he first met her. She initiated the whole thing. She brought him water. She brought water for her camel. She invited him to her house. And when they asked if she wanted to go to a foreign land to her to marry this person she never met, she said absolutely. She's a person of initiative. And so she wants to know what's going on because she had 2 kids kicking inside of her. And Hashem said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 regimes from your insides shall be separated. The might shall pass from one regime to the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. And I hear the music, and I'm sorry to say that I have to stop here. I was just getting started. Thank you so much for being with me, for bearing with me, and pray for the safety of our soldiers, for the return of our hostages, and for victory of good over evil. Thank you so much, Temple Talk.